Hello, and welcome to another episode of Sharing Wisdom. I'm your host, Angie Wisdom, and today's episode, we're going to talk about our personality traits, understanding what our strengths are and some of our opportunities, but from a whole new perspective that you've probably never even considered before. Actually understanding your personality through your own handwriting. My guest today is actually an expert in handwriting analysis. I know you might be going, what in the world do we have going on here today? But trust me, this is interesting. I was actually on his podcast a few months ago and he analyzed my handwriting live, and it blew my mind how spot on he was with his interpretation of my personality. So I've got him here today to talk to us about leadership, to talk to us about seeing those strengths and opportunities to create change, and how he brings that out there in the speaking world and the companies that he works with. He's an author, he's a coach, he's a speaker, he's an expert in handwriting analysis. It's Jamie Mason Cohen is joining us today, and we're going to tap into what he can tell us about our own handwriting, even maybe doing a handwriting analysis for you all. So let's get started here. All right. So Jamie, let's talk about the whole signature analyzing process, because I had so much fun when I was on your podcast and you were analyzing my signature. And I actually had so many people reach out and be like, that's so cool. Did he know that stuff about you? Or like, did you guys talk about it? And I'm like, no, honestly, like nothing. So, shed a little light on that. Like, first of all, how in the world did you even learn this or become gifted in this to figure out that this analyzation of the signature tells so much?
Yeah. Well, Angie, I was about 13 years old and I was in 8th grade. I was standing on stage giving a soliloquy, a Shakespearean soliloquy in front of all my classmates. And I froze. I couldn't get the words out because at that time in my life, I stuttered. And what happened was the kids started laughing at me, not with me. And I came home and I told my mom about what happened. I was devastated. And she said, honey, let me look at your handwriting. Because my mother was an educator, but she also did this thing called handwriting analysis as a hobby. So she looked at my writing and she saw it almost looks like a figure eight, like this, like my hand, if you're seeing this online, and high T-bars. And she said, honey, the combination of the figure eight and high T-bars means in handwriting analysis that one day you're going to maybe be a writer or a speaker and you have high goals because of the T-bars. So I looked at my mom. I was totally skeptical. I said, Mom, are you telling me you can analyze my personality based on a few strokes on the page? That's insane. Although I didn't say that to my mom because she's my hero.
Right.
But what it did is it planted a seed that I could change and I could grow. And I started learning about this weird, obscure personality assessment tool called handwriting analysis.
Wow. So it truly just stemmed from your mom did this as well. And that's wild.
Yeah. Yeah. My mom did it. And then I started seeking out, how do you get certified in something like this? But as a teenager, I wasn't really thinking about how could I use it as part of a career.
Right.
Yet, all these things, these synergies or coincidences started happening where I met one of the top graphologists in the world. And I studied under him, and he said, do you want to be part of this elite group of handwriting experts from around the world, some of whom were decades older than me, Angie? And so what happened was I started meeting with them and seeing their secrets of how you can tell what your signature means beneath the surface. And what I noticed with whether they were from India or Chicago, which two of them were from, they all had the same analysis. They could all see it in their own way, but the traits were the traits wherever it was. So the traits do not lie. They simply show up regardless of whether or not you think your writing changes. Your writing might change over time, but ultimately who you are as a person lies beneath the surface of your writing.
So fascinating to me. And I want to ask you more about kind of the understanding and the process of that in a little bit. But I'm super curious because this is where my mind goes. Like, your mom planting that seed in you, like, did you hold on to that and always think like, I'm going to be a writer, I'm going to be a speaker? Did that like guide everything?
Well, it came full circle decades later when I became a writer, a speaker, and really someone who builds curriculum for business
Mm-hmm.
teams now, but I did that in the education sector. So it wasn't apparent to me until decades later, but I think that was the power. I'm a father now. When you plant a seed in a child that they have a power, even if they don't see it themselves, you're believing in someone before they even believe in themselves. And
Mm,
handwriting analysis became the vehicle through which my mother helped me see what I was not ready to see yet.
that's so powerful. What a gift she gave you.
Yes.
That's pretty amazing. So you had this then curiosity and you started building out your knowledge and experience. What did you want to do with it? Like you were going to analyze people's signatures, but for what purpose? Or
Well, at
handwriting, I should say
first,
too. But
yeah. Well, at first, I watched my mom, my sister and I, a couple of years apart in age. We were young. We were around that time, 13, 14. We were at a party and I watched my mother analyze this woman's handwriting, and they didn't know each other. And within
mm-hmm,
about 5 minutes, it was as if they were old friends. This woman hugged her. She was crying a little bit. And I thought, but crying in a positive way. And people started gathering around them, the other people at the party, not just family, it was friends, acquaintances. And I watched this with my sister. And I said to my sister, Carly, I was like, I want to do that. I want, like,
mm-hmm,
I have trouble talking with people. I had my stuttering issues still that I was working through. And I didn't have a lot of friends, although I wanted to be more social and I was introverted. And I thought, look what mom just did. She just
mm-hmm,
connected with this stranger. And within minutes, they had this bond. And so that was my first purpose, Angie, was how do I connect with people as an introvert when I don't know what to say? And just like you and I did, even though I'm not making that direct comparison, what I love about this is that to this day, I am more of an introvert. I'm more of a situational extrovert when I in front of people. And after the talks that I give that have handwriting as this frame, although we talk about leadership, I will say at the end of a talk casually, okay, I'm going to wrap up in about 5 minutes. Just before we end, I'll be standing over there. You see beside the left doors on the east wing, I'll be standing over there. And if you want me to look at your handwriting to see what traits lie beneath the surface of the kind of leader, the kind of person, the kind of friend you are, just meet me over there. And one time I saw everybody get up before the end of my session. And I thought, are they leaving? Was I that bad that everybody's taking off? And Angie, what happened was it was this conference with 300 women. And
oh
I thought,
gosh.
oh my God, like I'm so embarrassed. What happened? I thought it was going pretty well. They're laughing. They look,
Uh-huh.
and what happened was I said that out loud. I said, why is everybody leaving? And one woman turns to me, as she's running, and she says, we're all trying to get in line first so you can analyze our handwriting.
Oh my gosh.
So I have this little video I posted on TikTok or Instagram with this lineup of people. It goes and it went on for an hour and a half, and like literally
Wow.
80% of the audience was waiting. So
That's
why
wild.
is that? Because we all are curious to learn about ourselves, especially,
Mm-hmm.
right? Especially if it's something that intrigues us, even if we want to prove it to be not true, even if we're skeptical or highly analytical. And sometimes it's those people who have their arms crossed and they look at this and they say, this is pseudoscience. This is like a carnival trick out of a Cracker Jack box from the
Mm.
1970s. Prove to me. And then I'll just talk to them about the relationship with a parent, like I did with uh, Martin Luther King Jr.'s daughter, Dr. King. And she was speaking at me after an event. And she went up and gave this brilliant talk. It was more of a panel. And then she's signing books and she looks at me and I look at her and she says, I said, oh, yeah, I was speaking afterwards. About what again? Handwriting. Oh, yeah. She goes, you want to analyze my handwriting? So I look at her signature and I told her in front of her assistant, I said to her, as she's signing books for other people, I went, Dr. King, you are much closer with your mom in terms of who you are than your dad. I'm sure your dad was important to you, but it was your mom, Coretta
Mm-hmm.
Scott King. And she turns to her assistant and she said, what? Yes, yes. And I said, but your mom was hard on you, wasn't she? She goes, oh my God. Yes, she was hard on me. So we had this whole, so she opened up. And then I said, and you got to slow down because see how your loops are this and this. I said, Dr. King, let me tell you, you're doing too much right now. And you got to tell your assistant to stop booking you so many things back to back because you're not going to stand up if you continue. And she said, I've been telling you that. Okay. And then she said, what's your name again? Jamie. She goes, walk with me. So we walk and talk for the next 10 minutes. She ignores everybody. And it all became two strangers, different background, but it was about who that person was in a unique way. Everybody wants to hear that.
Man, and all I think about, and I know this is a really weird analogy, but it's like it's almost like speeding through the get to know you of a relationship. Like people instantly feel understood.
Yes.
Like, oh, you see me, you know me. And that establishes a connection. I mean, if we talk about it from a sales perspective, right, it's what every salesperson is trying to do when they connect with somebody 10 times, right? We need all these touches. We need to learn about people. And you do it in an analyzation of handwriting in a matter of minutes.
Wow. Yeah, there's two things you said there that I want to amplify. You said it's people want to be seen. And you also said on the practical end, it could be used for sales. It could be used for better understanding how two people on a team get along. I've done this team building where I'll do this even virtually, where different people put their handwriting on the screen and I will tell them what their strengths are, amplify their strengths to the team so that other people know where they're coming from. And that's powerful in sales because is someone more analytical or are they more on the other side? Are they more conceptual? Are they more of a structural thinker? Are they more of a empath like me? And so different types of people respond better when you communicate in a different way. They take feedback in a different way. In sales, someone who's very stoic when you're pitching them, they might not be not interested. They might be processing it and they're going to drill back questions about logic. So if you know someone's highly logical, then you don't do the kind of gentle, not gentle, but more emotional or moving stuff that I might like as well. You go right to the analytical part and go, okay, Jamie, this conversation with Andy, just tell me what I need to know. Tell me what the facts are. Tell me how I can do this and how I can use it. That's that more analytical, even my tone of voice. So yeah, it becomes something that's not manipulative. I would say it's highly useful and it's doing someone a service by better trying to connect with them right off the bat and not needing to go back and forth through multiple times of this social game. It's like, this is what I see in you and this is how I can help you.
Right. And if people ask questions, well, I think that's part of the hard thing for people is that, you can ask questions to get to know people, but sometimes people don't feel as comfortable asking those questions or the person giving is guarded, right? Like, oh, you're talking to this person who's trying to get my business, so I'm not really going to show all my cards. Very interesting. I'm curious, what is the difference between there's a lot of personality assessments out there. So how does it fit in or how does it compare, to somebody who's going, oh, well, we're taking, the DISC assessment, Myers-Briggs, Strengths Finder, and versus you analyzing handwriting?
In one sentence, it's fun, fast, and accurate. Okay. Yeah. And it's definitely accurate. And I would, whether it's me or someone else, get someone to do this for you who knows what they're doing. And I would say it's at least 95% accurate. And I only put the 5% in because there's a human, it's not AI, but even AI is not always accurate. So there's always that sense of inaccuracy, but it's highly accurate. Now, the other question you said was, what did you just say? What was the other part of it?
Just how does it either fit in or how does it compare?
Oh, yes. Well, when people have done this or I've done this at groups, they will say, I've done Myers-Briggs, I've done DISC. And you know what's fascinating? It's so similar and aligned to what they were saying. So that to me has been inspiring because I have certifications in, for example, the leadership circle, which is what makes leaders great based on competencies and tendencies. That is, this wide ranging survey and this data that's been collected over 15 years that's been validated by leading MBA programs and on and on and on. And yet when I do handwriting analysis in the way I do it, so I can do it in 30 seconds or less, and it's highly accurate. That tends to line up with these very detailed studies that people have been doing for 20 years. So all I know is it works. It looks like a magic trick, and in a way it is, although unlike magic, it's real. And it's
Mm-hmm.
based on me looking at thousands of people's handwriting, and the foundations of handwriting analysis is psychological, where psychologists looked at thousands of people's handwriting and saw patterns. So, Angie, if you're, whatever I said about you, that's not just you. There is a pattern of when people do this, it tends to be this trait. And there's over 100 traits that I can see in handwriting, and an infinite number of patterns that exist that make you the person who you are. So your writing is, so your signature is what you want the world to see, and your writing or printing, although writing's
Mm-hmm.
easier, is who you are
Mm-hmm.
underneath the surface. And
Mm-hmm.
so the gift in this, what I've developed, is it's really about making connections between different traits, so that you might have a trait that I've seen 1,000 times, but the trait that Angie has combined with these three other traits, I'm making a connection in my mind as to say, if someone who has this trait plus this, what is the puzzle that makes Angie the sweet, generous, one of a kind human being that you are? And what value could I add to you in the moment that could help you? There's one other thing.
Mm, yeah.
There's one other thing there. I'm not afraid, and this is right on the edge because some people say, don't do this. I'm not afraid to be a little bit prescriptive without giving unsolicited advice.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes as coaches, I coach more teams. I don't coach individually so much, but with handwriting analysis, I will say to someone, do you want me to tell you about your strengths? And do you also want me to tell you about areas that you might want to improvement? 99% of the time, they say yes to both, even before I could finish talking. I think the reason is because people are hungry
Mm-hmm.
for someone who they trust on some level. And just like I just seeing your energy, this is not about handwriting. You're someone that people trust. I just feel that in you, that empath in me. And I think what I've been told over and over again is that people trust me when they meet me after a few minutes. Maybe not everybody, but like they meet me and I'm not judgmental. I'm here. We're on the same team, even strangers. And what handwriting allows me to do is offer, based on my decades of life experience and these different, I worked at Saturday Night Live, I've worked as a teacher, I've worked as a professor, I've done, I do speeches now, all these different things in my life, both good and challenging. And I pull all that together and I say, this is what the handwriting shows. And if you want me to give you a gentle direction of where I think you might want to be, you go. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not, any type of a professional when it comes to psychiatry, but this is what
Mm-hmm.
I'm seeing. And
Mm-hmm.
people tell me afterward, it's very helpful. And they can't believe in a minute I'm telling them about things that they've had detailed analysis on for years. And within a minute, I'm saying, why don't you try this or this? So I find people like that. They like a little bit of prescriptive guidance without me saying, this is the one way you should go. It's just, this is what the handwriting is saying where you are right now in your life.
Oh, I can see that big time because, oftentimes you take an assessment and you get this great clarity, which is great because you have to have awareness, you have to know in order to grow type of thing. And that's huge, but you add this human element into it to where it's like, and here's, that next step of it. It's not just about knowing, but you're giving them actual guidance, if they want it, on where they can improve. And I love what you said too about being able to kind of combine it all together and see. So it's just a totally different perspective to have a human element into it versus just taking your assessment and getting your results that are right for this type of personality type. Not to mention, I'm always kind of a little bit of a believer that people take those personality assessments and you can very much answer kind of the what you say about your signature. It's what you want the world to see you as. You can very much start to answer those questions in how you want to be seen versus how you truly are.
Yeah. I never thought of it like that. That's an excellent point, is that sometimes people show up with a mask in their
Mm-hmm.
professional life, and that's because they needed that mask for survival. Maybe they dealt with a narcissistic parent or in a bullying boss early on, and they felt like they had to put on this armor. and that the only way that they could survive in those worlds was to be tough, to almost be cold on the outside, but inside they're soft and they're empathetic and they're kind and compassionate. But not everybody sees that because of that armor. And sometimes with something like this, I don't have any connection to them previously, just like you and I didn't. And so it's just an objective. I'm not judging your energy. I'm judging what the strokes say. So people relate to that too, because they don't feel judged. They feel like this piece of paper with these strokes and this random guy is saying, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? And that can be really helpful to remind you who you truly are at your core.
Mm-hmm. Fascinating. So talk to me about like where you're going and doing this, because I feel like, everyone send your signature and your handwriting to Jamie. He'll analyze it. Like, I feel like you would have a line everywhere, whether you're speaking or whether people are emailing you. So where are you usually doing this? I know you said you coach kind of groups and you go into companies, but how and where are you using it?
So I'll give a specific example coming up. I have a keynote I'm in the Toronto, Canada area, although I am giving talks all over. And I am giving a talk, I have to think about, in Saskatchewan, which is a province in Ontario. I mean, not in Ontario, in Canada. And it's for 200 long-term care workers. And they've asked me back 3 times in different provinces. So what I did that is I give a keynote for about 50 minutes where I look at what your signature says about your leadership traits. And we look at 7 traits that you have in your handwriting compared to extraordinary people from around the world, leaders, everyone from Mandela to Maya Angelou. We look at their handwriting and we say, what traits do you have? And what does science tell us about how to bring these leadership traits into your life? So everybody writes 2 sentences that you wrote. And then at the end of that 50-minute keynote, I say what I said earlier, which is, if you want me to analyze your handwriting to tell you how you're showing up and work in your long-term care residence, or just you have a question. I like when people ask me questions about relationships. I'm not going to give them a major prescription, but if they ask me about relationships, if they ask me about their kids, if they ask me about this job, if it's a good fit, I'll ask them 1 or 2 questions and I'll get right to the heart of it and say, based on the writing, you might want a job where you have more responsibility as a leader, because this shows you need a job where you're given more responsibility. And right now you feel a bit stuck. And how does that land with you? It does, or it doesn't, or whatever it is. So it's a 3-minute conversation. So that I've done that each year. And it's not the point of our interaction. It becomes the outcome that's customized to every single person. Because I know I saw you running a big event recently, is that I find that I'm in this world all the time. So I'm usually from a speaking or workshop creator. Tomorrow, it's with a group of franchisees. I'm always saying, what can we offer people? Or what can I offer a workshop event planner that people haven't seen before, yet is highly valuable, that helps them connect, build camaraderie, and leave with practical takeaways that solve problems? And I have several other talks that I give. This is the one, Angie, that even though up front, some people are highly skeptical of, like, am I really going to spend an hour or 2 watching some guy do this? That's the hardest part, has been marketing it. But when people are there and they're in that lineup and they're next, and I'm saying, Joanne, this is how you're showing up, they don't want to leave. And right. And they will tell me about the best moments of their life and the worst moments of their life. And they're like, I haven't told a friend that, and I've had these friends for years. And so that's how I usually use it, as at the end of retreats or at the end of workshops or talks, where every single person in the audience, and I'll stay all day if necessary. And I've stayed till midnight. I was a big finance company, and I did it over dinner. And the organizer says, I know in the contract it was for 30 minutes. I don't know how many people will show up. I think there will be a few. We went till 2 a.m, and it started at 8. And it's exhausting, But like, I
Yeah.
feel, wow, I could add a lot of value to these people's lives. They're crying, their couples are coming up. I'm talking about the couple. I've done couples at retreats where I have the couples talk to each other about their handwriting, and it's really unique.
So fun. I'm like,
Yeah.
gosh, where can we put you into our space, Jamie? My mind starts racing. I'm like, okay, what's the next event? What's the group I can bring you into? Because it really is fun. Like you said, people just want to learn about themselves,
Yeah.
and the awareness and clarity just goes such a long way. And so I feel like you're such a contributor to people's future when they have this clarity and they can start making different decisions.
Yeah. And that's the other thing I love, Angie, is that with one of my keynotes, I thought I want to focus more on an area that I'm seeing come up over and over again with CEO groups, an
Mm-hmm.
area, a real problem that many of them have. And so the beauty of handwriting analysis is that talk that it's about conflict resolution. It doesn't have a handwriting component, but I thought, you know what? It would take me about a few minutes to just say, okay, well, I can tell how people deal with conflict. What type of style do they have in terms of dealing with stress? How do they deal with different kinds of personalities who are they're engaging with? And so the
Mm-hmm.
beauty of handwriting analysis is that it can be adapted to any topic that someone wants to talk about. You want to talk about finance?
Mm.
Well, I can see how you're showing up with money. You want to talk about learning styles? You want to talk about conflict? You want to talk like it's who you are underneath the surface. And it's
Mm.
up to me to pull those pieces together that matter to you, because I'm not going to tell you everything. I'm going to talk about what you care about right now.
Oh, okay. Well, we're going to talk offline. Something just sparked for me. And I'm like, now I know. Yes. But you bring up something that made me want to ask you a question. You probably see commonalities all the time when,
Mm-hmm.
like you said, like something that comes up a lot for CEOs is this conflict resolution.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to know about that because that's very intriguing. We have a lot of CEOs that listen. But
Yeah.
what are some of the common things that you see pop up? And maybe it's just that you want to share on right now, but anything else?
Well, on conflict resolution, I'll see if I can make a connection here with handwriting.
Yeah.
Is I've I've done about 100 CEO advisory board group talks in the last 3 years in Canada, the United States, with Tech Canada and
Mm-hmm.
Vistage. And
Mm-hmm.
these groups have business owners usually between 5 million and 50 million. But in New York, there was a few people who had billion-dollar companies. So these are like high-powered CEOs and key executives of those companies. And what I realized was that conflict resolution has an actual cost. And so I started asking these CEOs anecdotally, what is the cost of unresolved and unnecessary conflict to your companies? And then I asked them, can we put a number to it? What would you say is the wasted time per day in your company on the unresolved conflict that you chose? So, for example, lack of accountability, lack of results, very specific ones where there's interpersonal conflict between team members that
Mm-hmm.
they're in their silos and they won't speak. And so projects get pushed to the side. And I started collecting these over the last year. And it turned out that on average, CEO said that there is a wasted 4 to 5 hours per day
Wow.
based on unresolved and unnecessary conflict. And there's not a lot of data on this. I have a friend who is a professor and at a business school, and he helped me even do some research. And he's like, there's not a lot of people who've actually put a cost to this. So what does that affect? Turnover, mental health
Mm-hmm.
days on a practical level, and the thousands of dollars, 4 to 5 hours per day, say on in a $25 million company, let's on average of those companies, times, let's say 290 to 300 days a year, taking weekends and sick days, that turns out to be on average about $250 to $350,000 a year wasted. And one of the leaders of this group pulled me to the side and said, Jamie, I think there's one thing you forgot. I go, what? She said, I think that number's low because we're just talking about what the CEO thinks. What about all the other members of the team, the things the CEO
Mm-hmm.
might not even be aware of? So that on its own, I've been developing and iterating a system to deal with that, to help them mitigate
Mm.
unresolved and unnecessary conflict. How it connects to handwriting is, well, handwriting is not the point of mitigating it. But if everybody shows me their handwriting, then that becomes a system where I can say, okay, well, I have my 3E framework: empathy, evaluate, and then elevate. And this works. I've worked this through. There's science to back this up. Yet you want to do something you've never done before. Let's just have some fun here. Let's look at how you deal with unresolved and unnecessary conflict. Let's look at your handwriting to see if we can glean any light to help you better deal with it so we can mitigate that number. Because any good CEO will take on some responsibility for that wasted time and effort. What are they missing? What are their blind spots? And what are they good at when it comes to dealing with it? So the handwriting becomes this excellent tool, just like you're a world-class coach. CEOs, I believe the best CEOs have coaches like you. Handwriting becomes just another piece, another nuanced approach that adds to what someone like you says. It doesn't take away from it. It just says everything Angie said. And if you want to resolve conflict more effectively, look what's happening over here in the handwriting. I'm curious, when you're stressed and you're dealing with a direct report who's rude and impatient, are you defensive? Because right there, it's saying that you get really sensitive when you feel that your ideas are undercut. No, I'm not sensitive. Really? Because I'm a sensitive person. And right now, I'm sensing, based on this and your reaction, that you get a little oversensitive. No, I don't. And so it brings up this wonderful conversation about how they're showing up and not just how it's costing their team. So that's one quick way that I've started saying, there's a perfect example of how we can analyze language styles, or maybe better, communication styles. And handwriting, the middle zone is how you communicate. So I don't remember what I said about you, but that whole middle zone, your O's, your A's, all those letters, that's how you show up. Are you open? Are you more, not you, but are you open? Are you more secretive? Are you the kind of person who walks their talk, who are a bit guarded in terms of communication? All these things you can see in the middle zone. That's communication.
I feel like I know this is the craziest thing. You might think this, and my listeners might think this, but as you're saying all this, it's like I feel like I'm watching a new series of a TV show where you come into these companies and you're like, okay, let's get the handwriting, and it's like you uncover what kind of is the central challenges and difficulties and how everyone's dealing with it. But it's such a way to kind of, lift up the hood and look under that and, check things out without really kind of needing the feedback from the people initially, which I think is huge. I mean, you can really shortcut a lot of that process by getting to the truth pretty quickly.
Well, if you're ever interested, I'm always up for collaborations with coaches and interesting people. That's something that, the way that you said it, I really appreciate. I've thought of bringing together a few world-class, intriguing coaches from slightly different perspectives, and then finding a person, a successful CEO or executive, and having a cumulative coaching session from multiple perspectives, and then watching them as they either apply what is taught or they resist it, and then coming back to them to see what the results were a week later or a month later or a year later. And to me, that's a show I would watch if you had the right group of 3 or 4 people who all descended on helping this person.
Fascinating. Yeah, my wheels are definitely turning. The one question that is really burning for me is, so will people's handwriting change?
Yeah.
That seems like it stays the same. So literally, if this person is no longer defensive or, closed off, like you'll literally see a change in their handwriting.
Yeah. I've seen it in mine. My wife's handwriting has changed.
Wow.
When my wife's handwriting, when she was younger, was very bubbly, right? And as she's gotten older, it's gotten smaller. It's gotten a little more analytical, right? And so as my wife has changed, and you could say grown, matured, evolved, so has her handwriting. With me, I was diagnosed as a 5-year-old as being a highly sensitive person, but that was the 80s. So they didn't have the term, like that excellent book, The Highly Sensitive Person. But when I did that test recently, I read the book and I said, oh my gosh, I wasn't surprised. 80% of the diagnosis of the highly sensitive person is me. And when they talk about the empath, it's about 90%. when I look at what are the clinical diagnosis of a empath or a highly sensitive person. So growing up, I was taught, not necessarily by my parents, but by society. You're a boy. Remember, this is the 80s. You're a boy. You shouldn't cry. Don't show too much emotion. Suck it up, right? Especially in sports. And I was like, but I'm emotional. How, like, this is like, you're like cutting off a part of my soul.
Mm-hmm.
And even now I'm getting goosebumps because it was painful to like hold it all in all the time because I was so emotional, and it came out in different ways. It's a curse and a blessing to be this sensitive. My handwriting, it continues the sensitivity, but not nearly as sensitive. So I used to have this big loop. If you're listening to this or watching it, I'm going to write it down. And even if this is what I love about handwriting, we can talk about this on a podcast. It's not just, you need to see this on YouTube. It's up to me to paint the picture. So listener of Angie's podcast or other means platforms, write the letter D, a small D, and do cursive like you did, even though you haven't written since the fourth grade. Or like you say in the United States, grade 4. I forget which is which. In Canada, we say the opposite. Write a small D and then write a small T, the letter T, like total, okay? Now, when you wrote that, look at the stem. The stem is the line, the stroke that goes up and down. Mm-hmm. Is that straight up and down? Or like me, I'm going to do an exaggerated version. Is there a loop on the T? And I wouldn't trust just one. I would like look at your journal if you keep a journal, or any scribble notes for the grocery list, and look at consistently, because we have to look at consistency. If yours looks like mine, I'm going to circle it. If yours looks like the one I circled, which is a big loop on the top, or here, so if it's the D, it tends to be sensitive about how you're coming across. It's sensitive about your appearance, about how other people are perceiving you. It might not even be true. It might be your projection on how you think you're being perceived. You're sensitive about how others see you on a personal level, your identity. If it's the T, which is this one right here, I didn't do a big loop. It's a little loop on the T bar going up. That tends to be, and I see this more with CEOs, sensitive about your ideas and how they're perceived. So that means if you're in a meeting and you say, I think we should go in this direction, and you get a partner or a direct report or a board member be dismissive a bit, or you perceive it as being dismissive, and they're like, yeah, we've already done that. That's not working. Let's move on. And if you feel as if you've been dismissed or your idea has been dismissed, that could shut you down or build resentment that you're not even aware of. And so we need to be, I use the word need because it's more than a want. We need to be aware of our sensitivity level, which is how are we perceiving these things? So when I see, it still flares up for me on both personal and ideas. When I look at my handwriting, because I'm writing in a journal every day, and I see it flare up, I try to be gentle on myself. I say, be gentle with yourself. And I just say, oh, I'm having a bad tea day. Like a bad hair day. I'm having a bad tea day. Okay, that's okay. It's flaring up a bit. Angie, I'm perceiving that Angie said something. You didn't. I'm perceiving you said something, and I took it the wrong way. It's okay. Just let it sit. I'm feeling emotions bubble up. That's my sensitivity. It will go away in about 40 seconds, according to certain kinds of therapy. And I think CBT says after 40 seconds, the emotion goes down, and I'll be fine. But it will happen because I'm like, why am I so emotional? I feel like I'm over emotional about this thing. Why did what Angie just say bother me so much? I don't even think she said anything that was so, I don't think there was anything particularly offensive about it. Or why did it bother me? And it's like, don't say why, just let it sit, feel the emotion underneath the idea. And then I was like, oh, bad tea day. I'm human. It's okay. That's what makes me great. It also is something that I need to be aware of, because if it's exaggerated, it could be a negative impact on my relationships.
I love that process there of like the acknowledgement, the grace. I always say, like, when you pause, we let the emotions go. So I didn't know that it was like 40 seconds. So that's very helpful to know. I felt
I
like it was
heard that.
sooner than
If
that, but
someone's listening
yes.
to this, yeah.
Yes. Okay. So I wrote mine because I'm like doing this as you're talking and
Yeah.
remembering. If there's like no loop in there,
Mm-hmm.
next to none, what does that
Mm-hmm.
mean?
If there's no loop, it just might be that it doesn't mean that you're not sensitive at all. It
Mm-hmm.
just might be there's a healthy give and take when someone gives you feedback or advice. You might take it in stride and you might look at it more objectively and
Mm.
more logically. Now, remember what I had said earlier, which was I had said that you can't look at a trait on its own. You need
Mm-hmm.
to look at a trait in alignment or in combination with other traits. So the first thought was, well, I showed you one trait for fun. It's also practical. If you see that sensitivity, I'd also like to see in a person 10 other traits to see
Mm.
if they're not showing up with the sensitivity there. Do you know what? Sometimes when people are self-conscious, which shows up it shows up in the loops of the lowercase m's and n's, where the second loop tends to be bigger than the first, and it can be a subtle shift where I literally have to put my glasses on to check. It's so small. That's another form of sensitivity, is form of self-consciousness about how you're coming across. It's subtle, it's different. So just because we didn't see it in the T's or the D's, it doesn't mean you're not sensitive. Because another way sensitivity shows up in a positive way is through the stroke angle. So the stroke
Mm.
angle is how you respond emotionally inside. Are you sensitive and empathetic to other people's pain? And are you also sensitive to when they triumph? Are you the
Yeah.
opposite of jealous? Are you celebrating with them? So when I see someone who does not have that loop, but I see a slight shift to the right in their whole writing, which again, I'm not going to ask your listeners to look at that because I've looked at this for 25 years. It's very subtle, but when you see that that stroke left slightly to the right, it's leaning to the right. That tends to be someone who is emotionally responsive to other people's feelings. You might even cry or feel when you're watching something on TV, a movie on a plane. Like I was watching the Mr. Rogers movie on a trip
Uh-huh.
back from Amsterdam, and I was crying. And my friend, who I was there on a business trip, he's looking at me and he's like, "What are you doing, dude? You're crying on the Mister Rogers movie on a plane." And I'm like, "I know, but it reminds me of my dad." And he's like, "I know, but keep it to yourself, right?"
I'm
So
the
this is
same way. Yes.
yeah, you're the same way as him or
No,
me.
as you like, and I remember you said my handwriting was going to the right because I mean, I'll see a commercial and somebody's winning something and I start
Yeah,
crying. I mean, I always say I have thick skin, like very, very, very little makes me sensitive about myself, but I am so hypersensitive to everybody else's emotions and all
yeah.
that. So
So
yeah,
that what you just described is when that stroke is to the right, like that, literally to
yep.
the right. That shows someone who can still think objectively. I think I probably said that about you
You
is,
did say that. Yep.
yeah, is that it doesn't mean the entire time you're going to give too much of yourself so that you are exhausted, enervated because you're taking on everything and absorbing everything of people you're trying to help or you're helping. It
Mm-hmm.
just means that you have that capacity to feel what they feel and then pull back just enough to give them logical and objective support.
Yeah. And that's what,
Yeah.
it's funny because people always go, I don't know how you do this. You hear everybody's stuff, and then you just go about and it's
Yeah.
funny you explain it that way. Well, I feel, Jamie, like everyone is listening and going, enough about, my handwriting or what other people see. Like they're jealous. They want to understand like how can they analyze their signature, their handwriting. So as far as people wanting more information, I mean, you don't really work one-on-one with people, but what would you tell someone who's like, this is fascinating and I want to learn more? What do they do with that?
Yeah. Well, they could go to my website like anyone, right? Jamie Mason
Mm-hmm.
Cohen. Or I'm on a new platform called Thinkers One, which is like
Mm-hmm.
Cameo, but for business,
Okay.
where people record these short videos and it's really cost effective. It's not like my usual events. And that's a way where it gives me room to record something specific for you that
Mm.
one of those things could be handwriting, about
Oh,
analyzing your handwriting, or a small team where everyone sends me in their handwriting, if this is the focus right now, and I
yes.
record brief analysis for each of those people, or you bring me on for 15 or 20 minutes at the beginning of a meeting. So
Yeah. Okay.
thinkersone.com. And by the way, not just for me, there's really interesting thought leaders on there. My friend put this together, Mitch Joel, who's one of the
Mm-hmm.
leading tech thought leaders in Canada. And there's Tom Peters and Dory Clark and lots of really cool thought leaders on there. But I'm on there, and that's a way of low commitment to work with me quickly if you want.
Okay, good. That's what I really wanted people to be able to take away. I
Yeah.
know there's a lot of business owners and CEOs listening, and that's a next level. So check out Jamie at jamiemasoncohen.com, because I think it's so valuable to bring something like this into your company. But for those maybe solopreneurs or smaller teams or something, then maybe check out on thinkersone.com and find Jamie on there. I mean, from my perspective, and I'm so glad that I was on your podcast and you did this for me first, because it allowed me to bring you on my podcast and speak from a place of honesty and experiencing it myself. And it really was eye-opening, and everything that you shared was so spot on. It was fascinating. And like you said, people like to learn about themselves, and you said some things that really kind of gave me confirmation, that gave me clarity. So it was super, super fun. And I encourage anyone who wants to try something out like this to reach out to Jamie. It's been a good experience.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. And
Thank you,
thanks for
Angie.
chiming in today. Thanks for joining us and sharing some insights. And we will definitely figure out a way to work together and bring you in here to help some of my clients analyze their handwriting as well.
My pleasure. Thank you, Angie, for having me.
Great. You're welcome. Talk to you soon, Jamie. Thank you.
Talk to you.